My name's Jeremy, and I want to offer you some liberating motherfucking structures, y'all. Today on the docket, group dynamics, and a particular riff of what, so what, now what I like to refer to as great goodbyes. At least that's what it ensures. But first, a word from our sponsor, System Centered Training and the Theory of Living Human Systems, upon which everything in this video is really based upon. I fuck with SCT and their method, functional subgrouping. I'm not going to talk about it, but you nerds should check it out. All right, group dynamics. Tuckman. I hate it, but everybody knows it, so let's work with it. Forming, as they like to call it, or the time of assembly. When we come together, often for the first time, we join a new group, the vibe is one of avoiding conflict and staying on our best behavior. If you're familiar with the stress responses of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or fuck, forming is most identified with the stress response of flight, the avoiding, the fleeing of conflict. After we get exhausted from that, shit gets real as we move into storming, where we bump up against each other's boundaries, and that doesn't feel good and results in conflict that tends to equal exclusion. It's either this way or that way. And if it's not that way, then that way it's just going to have to go fuck off. The stress response of the storming phase is all about fight. And exclusion is really this either or dynamic. It's either this way or that way. Synthesis is almost always impossible here. After a bunch of that, and sometimes we exclude our way through scapegoating to calm shit down, we find ourselves in norming, the vibe of we do it this way round here. In norming, we stabilize more or less on some established patterns of what goes for normal, and as we learn to conform. Our stress response, often in the norming phase, is to fawn or sort of collapse in on ourselves and to surrender what we might not want to surrender, but we tend to prioritize the well being, and by well being, I mean stability of the group. Performing the unicorn of group development phases that is theorized where we can integrate diversity. And the vibe here is one of generative conflict. This is what we're going for when we talk about psychological safety, where we can take all those different directions and bring them together into something that where they can both exist and synthesize into some higher order sense making. The stress response here is relatively minimal. Freedom is what I wrote down, but it's really more about intimacy. As I know you, you know me, and even though we disagree, we can still stay together through that disagreement, and that's generally a good vibe. It's extraordinarily rare. I'll be really honest. Only like the cream of the crop, world class I've ever seen actually get to this state of performing. What doesn't get as much airtime is adjourning. When it's over, right? When either the purpose of the group is accomplished, in the happy flow, or the group just sort of runs out of vibe, or some big blow up happens and the group disintegrates. But the happy flow is, like I said, when the group realizes uh, its its purpose and lets or lets one of its members go. And this release can be a very powerful vibe that enables people to take the lessons and that they learned from this shared context out into their new adventures, out into the wild world. So, what we're going to focus on in this great goodbyes is a sort of exercise that helps us get into this happy flow of release when someone leaves an existing group. And we're going to use what, so what, now what to do that in this instance. What, so what, now what is one of the most challenging liberating structures, and that's what makes it my absolute favorite because it represents a pattern of thinking that is, while so absolutely blindingly obvious, is very hard to do because normally we want to get straight to actions yesterday versus what now what encourages us to do, which is first collect your data and your observations, discuss your what, then and only then discuss the inference, the add a building block on top of that what about that data means, and then and only then add your actions at the end of that line of inquiry based on the coherent flow up the ladder of inference. Once you've got all this stuff figured out and stacked up nice and pretty on top of each other, then we can talk about what we're going to do, but not before then. Ordinarily, liberating structures asks you to do 1, 2, 4 all here, 1, 2, 4 all there, and then 1, 2, 4 all. But that, like I said, is really challenging. And so, in this great goodbyes, I'm going to show you another way to deal with that. And that is just stack up your building blocks. What? So, what about the person leaving do you appreciate? Describe the behaviors, their qualities, their ways of being. And if you want to be a badass, be as concrete as you can by offering what you see, hear, and notice about those behaviors, qualities, and ways of being. Once you have set a good foundation of observable data, then go ahead and offer your so what. So, what has that contribution meant to you personally? What's been the impact? How did it make you feel? What emotions are present as a result of that gratitude? Let them know why it matters. Once you've added that block of inference on top of that data, then we can talk about now what? Now, what are you going to do to take responsibility for preserving what you value since that person is going to go? And this looks like a 15% solution because, this is something that the group the group's vibe or the group dynamics sort of elected this person to maintain. And now that they're gone, it's up to you to maintain it. So let's put it all together. And what does this look like? This looks like, hey, Jeff, you know, what I've really appreciated about working with you has been the way that you continuously help to the group to stay focused on the accomplishment of the goal of meetings. Um, when we get into these moments where we get sort of lost in the weeds, you are always there to direct us back to that purpose. And when you did that, I just always felt this sense of relief because we stopped wasting time And we actually made sure that we got accomplished what we needed to get accomplished. And, not only was I relieved, that meant that, I could stop stressing out so much when we got caught up in petty details. And so, what I want to do in order to make sure that we're still able to do that is I want to just at the beginning of the meeting, I'm going to try and make sure that it's clear for everyone at the start what we're there to accomplish so that I might be able um, to remind the group just like you sort of taught me how to do. And so you can see that just by offering that as one sort of coherent line, one stack of coherence up this ladder of inference, I'm able to give this person like the greatest compliment in the world and also enable them to leave the group with this sense of, ah, this role that I had taken in the group because I was just sort of the most apt to do it, is actually going to be secured and taken care of. So I don't need to worry about the group as I go off into my next thing, because these nerds have got it. This is an exercise, an instance of how I would recommend that most people use what, so what, now what, just to ensure that they offer an entire coherent stack of it up the ladder of inference. I think about them as building blocks, as you can see. And when someone is leaving your group, this is an incredible way to redirect, to also express gratitude for the role that the person has played in the group, and also to take responsibility for maintaining that role and put that back into the group so that they don't take that quality with them and leave you guys, quote unquote, lacking. My name's Jeremy Akers, Jeremy Nathaniel Akers. Thanks for your time, attention, and energy.